If you're new in town or just new to this whole podcast thing, you're tuning in to Lore by Night, the podcast that discusses all things vampiric with no fear of breaching the masquerade. In this episode, I shall be discussing my thoughts and opinions on the 2004 cult classic RPG game Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines that you have no doubt began to reinstall onto your machines already. Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines was developed by the now defunct Troika Games and was released in 2004 and is based on the lore and characters from the original tabletop role-playing game Vampire the Masquerade, developed by White Wolf Publishing. Vampire the Masquerade is similar in style to Dungeons & Dragons, where one person acts as a game master, a storyteller, and the other players are a party of adventurers. With Bloodlines, you can play as one of 7 vampire types that have their own powers and disadvantages that can make each playthrough unique and challenging. Each of their stats and powers are presented to the player in the similar fashion you may expect to find on the Vampire the Masquerade tabletop game. Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines is a role-playing game, but not like its source material. 5 of the 7 playable clans in Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines are recommended for new-time players. They are: the Brujah, or Brujah, have a reputation as fierce warriors. Their affinity for war is carried in their blood, causing them to frenzy, which I will discuss later on, more frequently. Then you have the Gangrel, who are similar to the Brujah in that they are among the best vampiric fighters. Unlike the Brujah, their ferocity stems from their animalistic instinct and rage rather than their anarchic anger, with one of their powers being able to turn into a wolf. Then there are the Toreadors, whose clan has been long associated with art and socializing, which is incorporated into their in-game weakness. They are the weakest fighters, but the best talkers. The Tremere are effectively the mage option in Bloodlines and have the best combat advantage in Bloodlines in my honest opinion. Lore-wise, they are not liked so much by the other clans, but this doesn't really matter in the game, however. Then there are the Ventru, who are a class associated with nobility, aristocracy, company CEOs, wealthy individuals, and politicians. They ruled as mortals and rule as immortals and have powers that dictate such motives. The last 2 clans should really be played once you have played the game for the first time and have a good understanding how the game works and where quest items and characters are. You have the Malkavian vampires, who are referred to as lunatics, for they are either a little bit strange or batshit crazy. Your breed of Malkavian, however, is somewhat eccentric. In the game, all of their dialogue choices are cryptic to the NPCs you talk to, and yourself, and it is presented in a different wonky font that is unique only to them. You will also hear whispers that only you can hear, that act as an eerie foreshadowing that newer players may not get. Malkavians also have a unique discipline, which is the in-game term for power, that can be used during dialogue to make certain NPCs say and do really weird things, such as making a long-lost friend make you think you are their baby turtle, or make a Russian mafia goon think he is a bear and he is hunting salmon. The salmon of course being his fellow mafia mates. The final playable clan in Bloodlines are the Nosferatu, who are my personal favourite clan. They are disfigured and have a frightening appearance, thus looking like monsters. This means that they can only use the in-game sewers to traverse and can't be seen by humans for reasons I will cover shortly. Playing as a Nosferatu means that you'll be effectively playing Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines as a stealth game throughout. To make up for this, your ability to hack into computers and pick locks is generally better than the other clan types. It is difficult to properly review and appreciate this game without learning its already established lore, so I'll do my best to describe that to you within the context of Bloodlines. The game begins in downtown Los Angeles, where you have taken a lady or man to your apartment for a one-night stand before he or she embraces you with no awareness that he or she is a vampire. A group of other vampires called the Camarilla bust in through your apartment door and throw a stake in your and your sire's heart. In Vampire the Masquerade, stakes to the heart merely paralyze you. You wake up in a theatre with a load of other vampires, all of which are important characters from the Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines game and the Vampire the Masquerade universe called the World of Darkness, who are the clan leaders, called Primogens, who are in an audience with Prince Sebastian Lacroix, the leader of the Camarilla, called the Prince, who reminds everyone of the importance of upholding the Masquerade, which is an organised campaign enforced by the Camarilla to convince normal people that vampires do not exist. The Masquerade is an important strategy for Kindred, the in-game term for vampire. Without it, the Kine, the humans, would rise up and kill all vampires. This for you is obviously not good. Kindred must have LaCroix's permission to create vampires, which is why your sire is then executed. It is heavily implied that you are to share that fate, but Anines Rodriguez, leader of the Anarchs, a group of vampires who are rebels and don't like most of the Camarilla's rules, not including the Masquerade, interrupts the execution. Not wanting a riot and wanting to appease his people, LaCroix spares you and sends you off to Santa Monica to speak to his ghoul, a normal person, sort of, but with some vampire powers and the need to feed off of his or her sire forevermore for blood, and sends you on a suicide mission. So you step out onto the theatre where you are greeted by the laggy tutorial screens and smiling Jack, an anarch who is clearly not keen on the Camarilla or the Sabbat, another group of rebels who basically want to enslave the mortals and give no fucks to the Masquerade, who have just started to attack the theatre. He is sympathetic to your circumstance and wants to help you out if you want him to. Whether you choose to go through Jack's tutorials or not, you arrive at your haven, your safe place, in Santa Monica, where you begin to get your bearings and are able to meet a whole host of interesting characters and play the game properly. From interacting with Jack, you can see the attention to detail given in the facial animations and the voice acting, which I think still holds up to this day. I mean, do a Google search on the voice actors of the game, I'm sure you've heard a few of them, if not in name but in sound alone. I'm in the mindset to believe that the facial animations of Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines surpass that of a lot of modern games, such as Fallout 4 and Mass Effect Andromeda. In fact, every character in this game is well written, with believable natural dialogue, even when profanity and jokes are thrown in. The writing is philosophically eloquent, satirical, with subtle undertones of social criticism. It is funny and witty, and yet incredibly poetic, taking pride in its command over the English language.
I'm not just some silly doll, you know. All my life, my sisters made me out to be a joke. She told you I was an embarrassment, didn't she? That I couldn't tie my shoes, let alone hold on to something for her. Is that it? She's always belittling me. She's the smart one, she's the favorite, she's the successful one. Well, it's not fair! I'm not a fool! This club's success is just as much my doing as it is hers.
Hello, young K-Knight. I see your face is not so lifeless. Your nerves not so deadened that you cannot express shock. Tell me, child, is my appearance that frightening? Or is it my knowledge of you that is so unnerving?
I'm like a book. All you have to do is run your finger down my spine and crack me open to see what I'm about.
By the clack-smack cracking of my thumbs, something wicked this way comes. I don't remember seeing you on the guest list for the dinner party. We're having a wrap party for the Misfits, about 40 years late. Cast and crew only, boss.
Rabbits also flee, but sooner or later their fate is a wolf's jaw. And the wolves have your scent. You're coated in the blood of the ninth one.
It is the only game I have played that makes the task of reading emails and documents on a computer, which is a compulsory act for many quests, fun and enjoyable, which is worthy of merit, for this game was released in 2004, so computers in this game also replicate the now ancient black and white screen and 8-bit font type. The writing makes every character, be it minor or major, filled to the teeth with lots of story and individuality, far more than you'll ever be able to learn about on a first playthrough, for better or for worse. Talking to characters is just as much as a reward as gaining experience points or a new weapon or money, as it covers many different issues, some of which are rather delicate and have never really been done before or since. The Vorman twins who rule the Asylum Club in Santa Monica is a particular favourite example of mine of such a sensitive topic. Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines makes fun of stereotypes without coming across as offensive, for there is a strange level of realism to it. When they are exaggerated, it doesn't make fun of these group of people, but how absurd the cliches are and how they are portrayed in media and the shallow mind of those who see such portrayals, i.e. the world. Such social commentary may rush past you during your first playthrough or second or third playthrough, but you should be able to enjoy its writing and presentation without feeling offended, which is something I write as fact and as something as a podcaster in 2020. So much of the world and quests of Bloodlines are so fun and memorable to explore, with exceptions to Griffith Park and the Warrens, which I will get onto later. Each of the 4 hub worlds creates the impression that they are rather big, when in reality they are incredibly small, which means that backtracking is not as frustrating as it may be in a larger game such as Skyrim. but with winding back streets that provide shortcuts and underpassages for you to commute your way, as you would in real life, makes the streets of this tiny boxed-in interpretation of LA seem rather authentic. Bloodlines is a game with multiple endings, which depends on who you side with at the final chapter of the game when you are in the back of a taxi running for your life for reasons I will avoid for spoiler reasons. It is something I have very strong mixed feelings about. You see, the game gives you many ways to respond to characters, depending on the circumstance of the encounter and your stats at the time, that can cause you to persuade a target with blue text, intimidate them with green text, seduce them with pink text, or use the dementation option to hypnotize or drive someone mad with red text if you are playing a Malkavian, so there's a lot of talking involved, you don't have to go in with guns a-blazing. The problem with the ending is the factions you can side with. LaCroix is an arsehole and is definitely manipulating and lying to you to do his dirty work, even with the use of the Ventru power Dominate to force you to help him if you decline any of his missions, which he shouldn't be allowed to do for he's in Elysium, which is a vampire neutral ground where no one can use their discipline/powers, but I'm digressing here. The other Camarilla representative in the game,
Strauss, Maximilian Strauss,
is a pompous stuck-up Tremere, which is rather standard for Tremeres really. So I made up my mind pretty early on during my first playthrough what I really thought about the Camarilla. This would mean that the Anarchs are the easiest to sympathise with, right? No. Not really. They are insufferable whiny teenagers and there is really no incentive to work with them. Skelter and Damsel just mock you for going to LaCroix, who you only do because he is the primary main quest giver, and are incredibly confrontational, with their leader, Nines, being rather stuck up also but in his own arrogant way. You can report to Damsel later on in the game what you do for LaCroix, acting as a spy of sorts, but nothing really comes to it, other than she stops being so nasty and sweary to you. Then there is the Kuei Jin, who are condescending and stab you in the back when they try to convince you that they mean you no harm. Fortunately, siding with no one is an option. It provides the most satisfactory ending, for me at least. With more thought and planning, choosing sides and factions would have felt more neutral, rather than this rushed last hope at survival it actually becomes. That being said, would defeating LaCroix feel so great if being forced to work with him was removed? Probably not. You can play Bloodlines in either first or third person, but it forces you to enter third person when you enter combat, unless you're using guns. Combat allows the player to use their disciplines, melee and ranged weapons, and there is a strange juxtaposition constantly switching between these two perspectives, first and third, as I never felt the game was meant to be played in third person the way it is. There is no mini-map or quest markers in the game, so you're left to your own devices to work out what to do. The game does offer in-game maps and street signs for you to use, and you will have to actually remember where things are and make your own landmarks in your head, like you would do in real life. Some players who are used to being spoon-fed everything by modern gaming standards may not like thinking for themselves, but I have made this task more daunting than it is actually. You will actually feel a sense of achievement when you have worked out where someone or something is through a series of clues and conversations that you've had to look for and not being led to. There is a difference, be it a rather small one. As touched on briefly, your character's abilities also affect certain ways of dealing with a quest. For example, the ability to sneak efficiently and avoid detection is influenced by the character's dexterity and stealth ratings. However, if the player does not stay in the shadows while sneaking past enemies, the character can still be detected and shit will then hit the fan. You gain experience points by completing quests and quest objectives, which can be used to make your character's skills better and stronger. This is the only way to gain experience points, so there is no real reason not to play every quest you get your hands on. You will find that you have completed most, if not every single quest, by the end of your playthrough, if you're vigilant enough to seek them out. Your powers or disciplines are determined by your blood pool, which is the game's mana bar essentially. To reveal your blood pool, you either drink from 3 different types of blood pouches or have to drink the blood of mortals. Doing the latter in public will remove 1 of 5 masquerade points. If all 5 are gone, it is game over. So make sure nobody sees you feed on that homeless guy in the corner. To get around this, you have to seduce a person, pay or seduce a hooker, not really that is a thing, and take them to a dark alleyway and feast on their blood. Feeding on rats is also an option, but some vampire clans throw up on harlots and rats they just devoured. Draining humans completely kills them, which costs you a humanity point. Lose too many of them and/or have no blood for too long and your character will go on a frenzy and kill everyone with no input from you, affecting one's standing with a masquerade. This is the beast within every vampire that just wants to let out. In short, Try not to be a cunt and uphold the masquerade. So you get the idea that dealing with mortals is free and experimental, but what about the quests themselves? Well, each quest is varied in design and never feels repetitive. One such quest has you explore the Ocean House Hotel to collect an item to ward off a ghost for someone who is interested in buying it. It is presented as being a standard fetch quest, with some cheesy scares, but the scares and the general atmosphere is superb. In the context in the game, it feels very out of place, but works incredibly well. It even won an award for Best Level of the Year when the game came out. The level in question is considered to be so frightening that there is even a console command to skip the quest altogether. For most of your first playthrough, it is highly unlikely that you would not have put a lot of points into your combat skills, for the game has taught you that the best or most engaging way to deal with the world is either to talk your way out of sticky messes or to employ the extremely overpowered stealth skills. I will guarantee you will not enjoy the quests found at the latter half of the game because they all require you to fight wave upon wave of enemies and you're just not prepared for it. I struggle with these latter sections all the time, and I've been playing Bloodlines on and off for about a year now. The Warrens and Griffith Parks are two such areas that are unbalanced, buggy messes that clearly were not planned or tested efficiently. You will also find that using melee weapons are the slightly more comfortable approach in combat, as none of the guns are particularly effective, especially at the beginning of the game. During a recent playthrough, I just punched my way through my enemies. Whatever your approach, none of it's particularly enjoyable, especially when the game encourages you to invest most of your stats into the talking abilities and how compulsory combat is for a lot of these quests. Without the aid of console commands, it is impossible to be legitimately good at everything, so if you're not a good fighter at the beginning of the game, you're going to have a really tough time from Chinatown onwards due to every quest being fight after fight after fight. But there may be a reason to all of this. Well, in fact, there is a reason for all of this, a reason that has been documented elsewhere in far better detail than I'm going to give you. But for a recap, Bloodlines was in development for 4 years when its publisher, Activision, decided that Troika Games was going to release that game on the same day as Half-Life 2. Not only was this incredibly arrogant and bad planning, but Bloodlines was released unfinished and was, and still is, considerably buggy, with only one official patch being issued before Activision closed the studio down some 3 months later. The only reason why the game is playable on modern PCs is down to the fact that people have been doing unofficial patches for the last 15 or so years. Some of these patches added in previously deleted content via the Plus patch, which I have never really wanted to play because said items were removed from the game for a good reason. Usually because they weren't finished or the implementation didn't really work that well, so approach that with your own caution. Whilst a lot of these bugs have been annihilated, many bugs remain, which may be down to some of these unofficial patches. In my most recent playthrough, certain quest-specific items didn't spawn like they were supposed to, such as a card key to enter the back of a museum, forcing me to use the console command to force said key into my inventory. Phones never stay in your character's hands, and the camera can always be stuck in third person constantly, which is annoying if you're trying to aim the camera to pick up items. There are other examples, but I wish not to go on about that too much. Bloodlines has a more cartoony look when compared to Half-Life 2, which is something I don't have a problem with, as it looks impressive for a game released in 2004 in my honest opinion. That being said, your character's eyes will never know what to do during cutscenes and will either look off to the side or just roll around in place as if they are getting aroused or something. The walking animations of most of the NPCs, especially that of LaCroix, are particularly goofy, as are the infamous dancing animations found in the nightclubs and bars. I believe this was an attempt for a more realistic animation at the time, but that is just mere speculation. Some of the explorable bars and nightclubs look a bit sparse too, but I'm putting that down to a combination of the rushed release date and an attempt for a more realistic approach in the time available. The sound design and music was composed by Rick Schaefer, who is fulfilling those roles in Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2. I love the use of ambience in some of the earlier areas of the game, such as the hospital, which is filled with idle chit-chat, phone rings and general ill people noises, reminding me of literally every hospital and local doctors in the UK. Some cutscenes happen in places and yet there is no music to accompany said scenes, which I find oddly pleasing, as not everything needs to have some dramatic stinger all the time. It adds to the real-world vibe to some of these moments. I will admit that some will feel stilted during these moments. The rock and electronic ambient cues do a good job at setting the scene and make you feel in an urban and dangerous environment that, at times, can feel a little bit sexy. This includes the Bloodlines theme, which plays on the main menu, which is pretty much a rip-off of Angel by Massive Attack. There are a load of licensed tracks that did make their way into the game and work really well, despite the fact you will hear the same tracks in the same places in the game over and over again. I am sure though, with more time and planning, there could have been some more variety in what you could hear in these dark, gothic venues. If video games were relationships, then Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines is the lover from your past who you still sigh for, the one who took your world by storm and drove you crazy with yearning, the one who makes every relationship thereafter mediocre in comparison. The writing of Bloodlines is the kiss. The combat and glitches are the stabs in the back and heart with a dose of lead poisoning, and yet, I love this game all the same, for isn't that the definition of true love? To love their flaws as much as their perfect qualities. If I have probed your curiosity just a little bit, I highly recommend you buy the game from GOG.com, as you won't have to install the unofficial patches yourself like you would do if you purchased it from Steam. It is usually cheaper on GOG as well. Now, if I was to rate this game out of 10, I would rate it Don't Open It out of 10, which is just as helpful as a proper out of 10 score. To be kept updated, follow the Law by Night VTM Twitter and Instagram pages to find out when we will upload each episode. You can also find out by subscribing to the YouTube channel and clicking on the little bell, as you'll be immediately notified when the latest episode is live. Until next time, farewell.